I'm not so sure I quite get the chase of Joe Thornton, but if that's the way it is, that's not going to tip over my vote one way or another. But I like that they've added some size. I like that they've added a little more tenacity, or tried to add that to their lineup. And I know Ottawa's behind the pack, but man, there seems to be some real positivity there as well. Like they had a terrific draft day, and they get a goalie that they hope can rebound in Matt Murray, and seems like they've bounced off the bottom of the barrel here a bit.
With Ray Ferraro, a TSN hockey analyst, you mentioned the Thornton story, and we brought that back up in the 4 p.m. hour, where there's more and more reports, Pierre LeBrun reporting that his understanding is Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe have reached out, which I think is a significant note. The fact that the head coach is calling, that doesn't mean you're just kicking tires, right? Like, if the coach is calling, then that brings it up a level in terms of your pursuit. But we just talked about maybe the reasoning behind it all. Clearly, if you bring in a guy like Thornton, he's got to be able to play and perform. I mean, that goes without saying when it comes to him, Simmons, Bogosian, bringing back Jason Spezza. But I sense that it's more than just a change-up in terms of the balance, and might be a little bit more than just what they expect to change on the ice, that these are guys who have been around the block. These are guys with some character. These are guys that can be pretty loud, right? Like, Thornton walks into your room, it's his room. Wayne Simmons is loud. Bogosian's loud, kind of old-school guys. I think the intangibles are in play here, and it might say something about Kyle Dubas and his growth, because I'm not sure he would ever consider them or care about them a year or two ago. But I think some of these signings and the pursuit of Thornton might be as much about on the ice. It's also about, in the room, on the planes, on the bench, and kind of balancing out the room a little bit. Could you see that being the case too?
Well, I hadn't really thought of it, but you bring up their loudness, and teams have to have life. And now we don't know what their locker room is like, but your room is a lot noisier, a lot more energetic with those guys in it. I mean, you talk to anybody in San Jose that's played with Joe for 15 years, and there is a million stories about how he enlivens the dressing room. Like, it's just his personality is just, it's infectious to be around. And so I see that, but I don't know. Are you going to play a lineup with Matthews and Tavares and Thornton and Spezza in it? Like, does that seem workable? And I don't know that it does to me.
You think he's too slow, Ray?
Yeah. Like your third and fourth spots are, I'm like, I know Spezza played more and better as the season went on, but are you looking for 12 minutes each from those guys? They kind of do the same thing, don't they? They could be on your second power play. They're not going to be fiendish checkers, or they're both good on the draw. One's a lefty, one's a righty. And then I think about it, if Joe's in the lineup, he's going to give you what Freddie Gauthier was giving you every night. Isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's so. On the fourth line, personally. Yeah. That's where I see him.
Okay, but then what do you have Spezza there for?
Well, maybe fourth line right wing or your 13th forward.
Maybe you just have 2 third lines, basically, and play them the same.
Or 2 fourth lines.
Yeah, depending on
how you look
empty.
At it.
Yeah. Like I agree.
Hell, if they're gonna play Spezza and Joe together on on the fourth line, they should sign Paul Henderson to play with them.
I think they might have called.
It's
Maybe Manuel Holzer made that call.
Kicking tires. That's the one thing. Like, I would have no problem with Joe Thornton if Jason Spezza wasn't there, because you could make a case for exactly what Spezza brings to the table: an elite, talented player who's near the end of his career, has been around the block, is a very likable person. We all like Jason Spezza, and Joe Thornton is that. And Ray, I said to the guys earlier, the one thing I like about Thornton is he has no filter. I don't think he cares if he doesn't like what Travis Dermott or Mitch Marner or somebody on that team, if he's in the room and he doesn't like what he sees, I don't think he's going to coddle them and be like, I'm new here, so I'm just going to take a back seat. I think he'll tell people what he thinks. And maybe that's what Shanny and Kyle are looking at is another strong voice in the room in a supporting staff.
There is not a filter, for sure.
Right.
And I say that as a positive.
Right.
Because the veteran voice on that team is Tavares, and he's not a loud guy. That's just not him. And Noodles, you've walked into a room where Joe's playing, and like it's the first voice you hear, no matter where you are in the room.
Yeah.
They were playing a playoff series against Los Angeles, and I was doing the series, and after one of the games, I just wanted to pop in to say hi to Danny Heatley because we played together in Atlanta, and I walk in and Joe's eating, like, how before they travel, they have pizza in the room right away so they can get something quick into their bodies. So Joe's eating a piece of pizza, and they call me Chicken Parm in the States. It's a longer story anyway. And so he yells across from the room. He's like, "Hey, Chicken Parm, who's the best guy you ever played against?" I mean, they had just finished a playoff game that they won. I don't know how the hell that question got into his head, but he yelled it from across the room, and I was like, ah. And so now I'm trying to figure out, and there's Joe eating a pizza at the same time. It just struck me as hilarious that. And then he grew his beard, shaved it off, and then he said, "I decided to grow it back because I'm 40 years old and I can do what I want." And I was like, "Of course you can."
Well, and guys, remember, sorry, Brian, remember you brought up some of the presence. How many times after games this past year did Sheldon Keefe have to come out, or Mike Babcock, and really say something pretty harsh after a game publicly? And you wonder if you have guys like you had Thornton, you had all these veteran guys. Maybe you don't have to do that. Maybe you can kind of let the room run itself. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
I will say, Noodles, jump in here, but I will say the best teams that I was on, the room pretty much ran itself. The coaches came in and they had the say-so and and this is what we're doing and blah blah blah. But the room essentially ran itself, and I would have a hard time envisioning the Leaf room doing that right now because it's so young.
Mm-hmm. In 2004, we lost 7-2 at home to Tampa Bay, and we had a scheduled day off the next day. And Darryl walked in and said, "I hope you all have a great effing day off. You guys can F off." And he walked out, and at that point, everyone's kind of looking at each other, and it wasn't Jerome McGinley that stood up. It wasn't our best players. It was Rhett Warner that stood up and was like, "Guys, we got to get it together here. Like, that's embarrassing on home ice." Like, it was the voices in the room and that leadership core. And of course, Rhett called a team party at his house, and was like, "Everyone to my house, nobody go to the bar. Let's go have some drinks and talk this out," type of thing. And, sure enough, a couple days later, we ended up bouncing back. But it's, you're right. It's voices in the room. It's allowing the room to dictate how the coach is going to deal with it. And I've had several conversations with guys like Joel Quenneville. It was like Joel said, "I never worried about the room." He's like, "I had Jonathan Toews, I had Duncan Keith and Seabrook. I had this core that they dictated how I was going to control things." And I would think maybe with guys like Thornton, guys like Spezza, Bogosian, Simmons, who have been around there. And let's not forget, it's not like John Tavares isn't a leader, like Morgan Riley isn't a leader, like Frederick Anderson, but it's just adding to that group that can be louder voices, and Austin and Mitch and all of them. And
it shelters those guys in the marketplace too, right?
Sure.
Like, we all know you guys are down there at the rink. When TSN has a game, we would like to speak with Austin, we'd like to speak with Mitch. Yeah. And now all of a sudden it's going to be, we'll take Joe. Like, if he's willing to talk, and Wayne, we'll take him. And, it's almost like these guys, the younger guys, it will be beneficial almost in a way that they were treated with when they were rookies. And that's not to suggest they'll be invisible or they won't speak. Of course they will. Mm-hmm. But I think maybe it helps them a little bit in terms of the off-ice stuff. But at the same time, make no mistake, this team's not going anywhere unless Austin Matthews drags it somewhere, right? And Mitch Marner and William Nylander. So all these other
just like Joe Thornton did in the day in San Jose.
Exactly.
When he was getting 100-plus points and dragging that team with him.
Right. Like the best players are still going to be the best players. If Thornton signs, that's great. Joe's giving you 11 or 12 minutes a night. It's got to be Austin playing 21 or 22 and driving this team, right? And I think that's the way Dubas is looking at it, where he's built some depth in net. He's added some depth on the back end. And I think the bottom six is going to be a collection of maybe some misfits. Maybe it looks a little bit different, feels a little bit different. But I think the top guys are going to be leaned on, and that's what they're paid to do. They better be able to perform and play big minutes and produce the way they're supposed to.